Greetings, Dr. Beth here, and now we're halfway through the course. You're now on Module 7 after having completed Stage 1 and Stage 2 of your backwards design unit. In Module 7, we're going to work on expanding and designing Stage 3 and getting into the meat of this beautiful unit that you're designing. The objectives for this module are that you're going to design an integrated and differentiated learning opportunities that lead students toward the expectations embedded in the unit assessments, and that scaffold student learning toward comprehension of the content and enduring understandings of the unit. Identify differentiated instructional strategies that make the learning opportunities of the unit more accessible to a variety of learners, and to recognize the twin sins of activity-based and coverage-style learning versus intentional learning experiences in UBD Stage 3, which you will get when you read your texts. Tasks. Read and watch and apply the resources provided for this module. Read Tomlinson and McTighe chapters 6 and 7. Scan Harvey part 4 for ideas. Read Sousa and Tomlinson chapters 3 through 6. Complete the Checking for Understanding for Module 7. And continuing the development of your UBD unit, create differentiated learning opportunities for students that are scaffolded toward mastering the unit objectives and meet the expectations of the assessments. Identify and add the instructional strategies you will use for each of your lesson units to the instructional strategies column in the template. Additionally, you're going to post your up-to-date UBD unit thread to the discussion forum before our meeting next Tuesday, because next Tuesday we're going to meet together and we're going to be doing a peer review of units. Even though they're not done, this is a really great opportunity for you to get other people's ideas and to share your ideas with other people. Note, nothing is due on your note-taking graphic organizer this week. It will be, again, next week. You'll have some things to add. Remember, you are writing a 2 to 3 week unit and submitting it in the Dropbox by the due date and time so you can make revisions and get feedback from me without penalty. So let's see what we've got in Module 7. What's behind box number 3? I will never be a talk show host. Not on purpose, anyway. Okay, so right here will be our screencast. Where to criteria are the criteria by which you're assessing your learning opportunities. You can open that and look at it. There's not much in Module 7 because we're really just working on learning opportunities. Here's what you have due. Okay, so for this week, you are going to be completing Stage 3, Opportunities to Learn. You're going to be writing what standards. Just all you have to do is just choose from your standards above and write down what standards are going for each of your lesson sections. Some of them are going to be together, some of them will be separately. You're going to write what you're going to do for each of the sections of your unit. You're going to have your introduction and your introductory activities, and then you're going to have the instructional strategies that you're using for your introductory activities. You're going to have lesson 1, and you will, as I mentioned earlier on, you're going to pull down, and I'm scrolling, oops, too far. You're going to pull your objectives down into the appropriate lesson. So not all objectives are going to go for each lesson. This particular objective has 4. This particular lesson has 4 of the objectives. And then, so you'll have your lesson 1 objectives for that lesson, and then what you're going to do for the lesson, and the strategies you're using for the lesson. Okay, and so this is all you're going to do for each one of them. I don't know why there's a bullet there. Now, lesson 3, this lesson only has 2 objectives, 2 of the objectives, but they all come from the objectives above. And the reason I'm having you pull them down, I was going to have you just identify them up above, but the hardest thing people had to do had last semester was to make that connection between the learning opportunities and the objectives. And so I am going to ask you to put the objectives for your lesson here. So these 3 elements of your lesson 3 will address these 2 objectives directly. And that's what this lesson is will cover these objectives. Lesson 4 will cover these 3 objectives, and it has 4 elements. Here are the strategies you're using, and if you notice I have begin with the end here on strategies about reviewing, as you saw that in the multicultural and the ESL strategies that we had in unit 6. So as much as you can add strategies that you know are going to be differentiated strategies for ELLs, for special ed, whatever, make sure that you put them here, put your learning strategies here. But we're going to go over a PowerPoint that will explain more about that. So this is the section that you're going to be submitting for this week. And then you will also, because we talked about graphic organizers that you're using, you're also going to submit your graphic organizers. And so I had 2 graphic organizers. I had an eating action plan and I had a Kim sheet for my learning opportunities. And so my Kim sheet's here, and I've included my Kim sheet for my vocabulary work, and I've included the weekly action plan for the student, and then their other plan as well. So these graphic organizers are, now remember that I told you don't put more than 3 graphic organizers. So if you have a ton of them, choose the ones that really are meaningful for your lesson, and just make a little comment about the other ones, and it's all good. So with that, I hope that you understood that. We'll move on to the PowerPoint, which is stage 3, plan learning activities, and actually that should say plan learning opportunities. Where to is the acronym that is used, Wiggins and McTighe used, to evaluate all the elements of your learning opportunities. I'm not going to have you do that, but I do want you to pay attention to it, which is why I'm doing this PowerPoint. So this is a stage where specific learning activities, lessons are planned to accompany each unit. The unit design in this stage should be based on the desired results from stage 1 and 2. Where to is an acronym for planning steps to help meet the requirements of the unit. So this is what they mean. Where are we going? Which is like the big thing. Those are the objectives, right? Why? What is expected? How will we hook the students? How are you going to hook them? How are you going to engage their interest? You know, what unusual or unique thing are you going to use to catch their attention? How are you going to equip students for expected performances? So how will the lessons actually lead to the assessment? The lessons actually lead to the assessments. How are we going to rethink or revise what we're doing? And that's assessment also, formative assessments. How will students self-evaluate and reflect their learning? So that's self-evaluation and reflection and the assessments. And you've already done that, right, up above. And so all you have to do is bring these into your lesson. How are you going to tailor learning to varied needs and interests and learning styles? That's differentiation. We're going to spend a lot of time on it next module, but you've already got, with your readings, you've got a big head start on it. So you'll already be pretty comfortable looking at how you're going to tailor the learning. And then how are you going to organize the sequence of learning? How are you going to scaffold that learning? So let's look at where we are going and why, what is expected. So in your learning opportunities, you're going to present the performance task or performance early in the unit. So this refers to the culminating performance task. You're going to have some small ones throughout the unit, like in the nutrition unit, they have a little poster, food pyramid poster. That is something, though, that you will be introducing to the students in the lesson. So it will be seen there in the lesson. Post and discuss essential questions, and you'll see that in the lesson, in the nutrition unit, that essential questions are used to start conversations about at the beginning of the unit and sometimes during the lesson. A lesson. Invite students to generate their own questions. Ask students to identify their personal goals. Give diagnostic skills or tests or pre-tests. Use know, want to know, and learn as a pre-assessment. That's a graphic organizer. What do I know? What do I want to know? And what have I learned? And then check for misconceptions. That can be a good pre-assessment. You'll find out at least what the students know, just the K column. And if any of you are interested in that graphic organizer, I'll make sure if you ask me for it, I'll get it to you. H, how will we hook and hold the students' interest? Again, same thing. Use odd facts or examples, like I used it wasn't Supersize Me. It was something on, yeah, it was Supersize Me, right? to hook them on looking at diet and what we eat and how we manage our health. Use odd facts for examples, use provocative entry or hook questions, present them with a mystery or challenge, present students with a problem that can't be solved until the end of the unit. Like, they have to get through the unit in order to get all the information to solve the problem. You could even have it posted on a wall and have them work down, put their ideas up as you go. Create a role play or simulation. Use technology to form connections as you are able. So E1 is how you're going to equip students for expected performances. So this is about instructional strategies. And we'll talk again about strategies at the end of this PowerPoint. Access your understanding and experience with research-based instructional best practices. Basically, use what you know, what you've been learning in your methods classes, what you've been learning from your practicum teachers and your student teachers, your host teachers. Well, actually, you won't be doing student teaching yet. Marzano on vocabulary. Get those resources and find even the best practices on a couple of the culturally relevant and the ESL things. Use those strategies. Those strategies are what you want to include in your learning opportunities. Consider strategies that work well with diverse learners and multiple intelligences. Literacy strategies, including those which we've highlighted in this course, become powerful ways to equip students for learning. How will we rethink or revise? It's hard to say fast. Reflection and revision are key elements to building understanding. When we teach students to revise, literally re-envision their work, we develop flexibility and critical thinking. There are 3 elements to consider. Rethinking in relation to big ideas or important concepts. So if you've done a pre-test with them and they realize that they don't understand quite what you were talking about or what you were leading toward in the learning opportunities, they get to rethink it and say, oh, I've revised my thinking. I now think it's this instead of it was that. And that's the revising or refining. And then reflecting, which is this whole thing, building metacognitive skills. Reflecting, thinking about your thinking and acting on it. E2 is self-evaluation. And these look like formative assessments. Easily done. There are many ways to build opportunities for ongoing evaluation, particularly self-evaluation. Tickets out the door, quick writing prompts, student self-assessment using rubrics or checklists. So they do the rubric checklist instead of you, and teacher-student conferences where you can ask them questions about what they understand. Or they can ask you questions about what they don't or do understand. In consideration of RNE2, a planned element of revision may need to become part of the stage 2 in your planning template. So in other words, this is part of what's going to be embedded in your assessment section. And you might need to add things. That's okay. Although we're going to, and the reason this is red is because we're really not doing a lot of differentiation piece now, you're still doing it. Tailoring the learning to varied needs and interests and learning styles. You're keeping that in mind even though you haven't had the deep immersion in the conversation yet. You've read, we've talked, you have an idea, and I'm sure you've had that conversation in other classes. In brief, remember you can differentiate both processes, how it happens, the kinds of things that students have to do, products, what they do, and the content, what you are giving them to do. For example, giving them leveled reading with the same content based on pre-assessment data. So if you know that a student can't read, you've got some students either that are special ed or you've got some really gifted students, find different kinds of literature you can use for their varied reading abilities and keep the content the same, and then the product, the assessment product, will look different for each one of them because they'll be at their levels of learning. Scaffolding is a big piece. How are you going to organize the sequence of your learning? It's I do, you do, we do, how much support, lots of support, a little bit of support, no support. In this particular graphic, we're looking at literacy, you're modeling reading, you're reading it with them, shared reading, that's a lot of support. Moving down to guided reading where they're sort of reading on their own or maybe with partners, and then they're doing reading on their own through the assessment. So you can see that everything leads to the assessment, and the assessment generally is independent except when it comes to things like culminating performance assessments, which are usually done in teams or groups or pairs because they're just wonderfully big projects. So a good learning opportunity is meaningful, relevant, helps students meet the objective, scaffolds students' learning and skills toward the assessment, is flexible, aligns with the type of knowledge and skills in the objective, and I will say is not trying to cover material but get at the essence of the material. We'll look at strategies quickly here. Teaching strategies are the methods you use to allow learners to access the information you are teaching, to access the information you are teaching. So that's what you do, the strategies, to help them learn. It's not the learning opportunities where you're having these activities for them to do that are leading to the assessments. This is actually how you go about moving them through the learning opportunities. This is how you get them to interact with the learning opportunities. For example, they might activate and connect knowledge. They might inquire. They might display it pictorially. They might prioritize. They might summarize. They might do it in small groups. And as I pointed out to you in the example on the right, there's a lot of different strategies you can use to engage different types of learners. Examples: students make connections with the read, write, talk strategy, which is a cooperative learning strategy. Students represent learning with an analytic diagram or an infographic. Students inquire with quick fact trading cards. Students determine importance from primary sources, so they can take primary sources and get together in teams, and what they do is they take the sources and they decide which one's the most important, and they put them in actual physical order on the table, and then they write some notes about each one as they go, about why it's most important, why it's next, and so forth. They write from a first-person perspective to summarize information, as if it was them telling the story, or them writing the book, or them giving the lecture, and so forth. So strategies are just what you do to lead students through the learning opportunities that give students as many different ways to access that material as you can reasonably do. It's every teacher's biggest challenge, and it's a very creative process because you have students of many varied abilities, and so that's the thing you're going to spend more time on in Module 8. So what you have down now will be fine, and then in Module 8 you may add to it. And actually you'll go back to those two cultural elements, the cultural relevance and the ESL one, and look at the differentiation pieces and see what you need to add, and you'll add those in Module 8. So next step, complete the elaboration and expansion of the learning opportunities on your learning unit template. Identify and add the instructional strategies you'll use for each of your lessons in the right-hand column, and make sure in the left-hand column you write down what standards you're using. Submit the completed sections of your unit to the assignment drop box by the due date for feedback and revision. And then you are going to submit by next Monday, you're going to submit your up-to-date UBD unit to the discussion forum in preparation for our peer review activity next Tuesday. So next Tuesday is not going to be, I'm not going to be going over this next Tuesday. We're going to be having our peer review, but I will answer any questions that you have. So your unit's not going to be done, but it's going to be ready for people, whoever your partner is going to be, whoever your critical friend is going to be during our Tuesday meeting. You'll be able to pull it up and look at it. And then for Tuesday, please copy out the peer review rubric and have it ready for class. And here's the peer evaluation rubric right here. It went underneath the drop box. So this is what you're printing out for class. And this is the discussion. This is the discussion that you're going to have with your critical friend next Tuesday. So make sure that you print this out. It's just for conversation and self-evaluation. There's your CFU integrated design. Here's your section due, where to criteria, which is just a really nice elaboration of the criteria we just talked about. And if you would just make sure, check off for yourself that you've included all these elements in your lesson, in your unit design, that you make sure that all these are in your unit design. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to seeing these next week and working with you next Tuesday on your peer review. It's a great activity, and it's a really very good learning experience. So with that, I'll sign off and wish you well for the week.